6 days ago, America and Israel launched one of the biggest military strikes in modern history. Iran's supreme leader is dead. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. And on the other side of the world, North Korea is watching every single move. Tonight on Capital Talk, verified facts, honest analysis, and the question nobody wants to ask: where does this world go from here? Stay with us. Good evening, and welcome to the Capital Talk. Tonight, we are breaking down one of the most consequential chains of events in recent memory: the USA, Iran, Israel military conflict that erupted on February 28, 2026, and what it means for North Korea, for global security, and honestly, for all of us. Now, before we begin, I want to be transparent with you, because that's what this channel is about. Tonight's script is divided into clearly marked sections. When I give you a fact, it comes with a source. When I give you analysis, I'll tell you it's my read or an expert's read, not a confirmed report. Because in times like these, the difference between fact and opinion matters enormously. There's a lot of noise out there right now, a lot of heat. Tonight, we're going to bring some light. 3 sections tonight. Facts, what actually happened. Analysis, what it means, especially for North Korea. And conclusion, where this is headed, and what we should be paying attention to. Let's get into it. On the night of February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated military operation against Iran. Multiple sites were struck, including locations in Tehran, Isfahan, Karaj, Qom, and Bandar Abbas. According to multiple confirmed reports, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei was killed. Iranian casualties exceeded 1,000 in the first 48 hours. Iran's state broadcaster was taken off air. I'll be honest, when this news broke, I did something I rarely do. I stopped. I sat with it. Because regardless of what you think about Khamenei, regardless of your politics, a head of state was killed in a foreign military strike. That is not something that happens every decade or every generation. The last time something at this scale occurred, the world spent years recalibrating. What I keep coming back to is this: when a superpower moves this decisively, every other country on Earth asks the same question: could this happen to us? And the answers they come up with will shape the next 50 years. Within 24 hours, Iran launched retaliatory strikes against 27 American and Israeli military installations across 9 countries: Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Cyprus. Iran's retaliation was real, it was fierce, and it caused casualties. But strategically, and I want to be careful here because this is my analysis, not a confirmed assessment, it looked more like a wide, painful response than a calculated counteroffensive. When a military fires in 9 directions simultaneously, it tells you something about the pressure they're under. It doesn't mean Iran is weak. It means Iran was already in survival mode on day 1. And that gap between the ambition of an axis of resistance and the reality of being struck this hard, this fast, is something the entire region is now processing. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. Brent crude oil prices jumped approximately 10%, reaching around $80 per barrel. Energy analysts warned of potential $100 per barrel prices if the closure continues. The strait carries roughly 20% of the world's traded oil. This one hits differently for those of us in countries that import oil. The Hormuz closure isn't an abstract geopolitical event. It is felt in the price of everyday goods: fuel, transport, food. I want to name that clearly because sometimes in these big global discussions, we talk about barrels and percentages and we forget. These numbers are people's kitchens, people's school runs, people's heating in winter. The Hormuz closure is where a war between distant powers becomes your family's monthly budget problem. And that's worth sitting with. President Trump stated the military operation could last 4 to 5 weeks and did not roll out the deployment of ground forces. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth described the conflict as not endless. Iranian security official Ali Larijani publicly rejected any negotiations with the United States. 2 sides, both locked in publicly. Now, I want to be transparent here. When leaders speak during active military conflicts, their public statements are often designed as much for psychological pressure as for actual policy communication. Trump saying 4 to 5 weeks may be a genuine timeline, or it may be a pressure tactic. I genuinely don't know, and anyone who tells you they know with certainty is overreaching. What I can say is this: both sides have now publicly committed to positions that make de-escalation harder to sell domestically. That's the part that concerns me most. North Korea's foreign ministry released an official statement through state media KCNA on March 1st, 2026. The statement condemned the strikes as, and I'm reading from the verified text, an illegal act of aggression and the most despicable form of violation of sovereignty. American conduct was described as shameless and gangster-like. The statement did not include threats against the United States, did not announce new missile tests, and did not signal military mobilization. I want to highlight something specific: what North Korea did not say. They did not threaten Washington. They did not announce a test. For a country that has a long history of escalatory rhetoric, this statement was, by their own standards, measured. In my reading, that restraint tells us more than the angry words do. North Korea is paying close attention to this conflict. They're not reacting impulsively. They're calculating. And a calculating Pyongyang, in my experience of watching this region, is worth watching more carefully than a loud one. South Korea's Kospi index fell 12.3% in a single session, its steepest single-day decline since the COVID-19 market shock of 2020. Japan's Nikkei fell approximately 4.7%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng dropped around 3.1%. Over 11,000 flights were canceled globally. Major Gulf airports suspended operations. Markets don't editorialize. They don't have agendas. They aggregate the collective anxiety of millions of people making financial decisions simultaneously. When South Korea's index falls 12% in one day, it means investors, rational people with money on the line, are pricing in serious uncertainty. South Korea sits in a uniquely vulnerable position. It's a U.S. ally with 51 million people living within range of North Korean artillery. Their market didn't just react to Iran. It reacted to everything this conflict implies for their own neighborhood. Here is the central analytical question of this entire situation. Iran pursued nuclear capability for decades without fully weaponizing. North Korea pursued it and completed it. Today, according to estimates from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, North Korea has approximately 50 assembled nuclear warheads. Iran had 0. The strategic conclusion that analysts across multiple institutions are now discussing is straightforward. States observing this conflict will likely interpret it as evidence that nuclear weapons provide a form of security that conventional military power and diplomatic engagement cannot. Professor Song Song-jong of Daejeon University, a former South Korean Defense Ministry official, stated, and I'm paraphrasing a translated quote here, that Kim Jong Un likely views Iran's fate as a direct consequence of not having nuclear weapons. I've thought about how to say this responsibly, because I'm not endorsing nuclear proliferation. I want that to be absolutely clear. But I think we do our audience a disservice if we don't name the conclusion that strategists in multiple capitals are drawing right now. The non-proliferation framework, the idea that diplomacy and inspections and treaties can manage nuclear ambition, has just been tested in the most brutal possible way. And the test result is not encouraging. Every country that has ever quietly considered a nuclear program is now running that calculation again with new data. That is the uncomfortable truth of this moment, and I think you deserve to hear it plainly. Before the strikes, North Korea's state media published language suggesting openness to U.S. engagement if America recognized North Korea as a sovereign nuclear-armed state. Separately, President Trump is scheduled to visit China from March 31st to April 2nd, 2026. Multiple analysts, including Professor Yang Moo-jin of Seoul's University of North Korean Studies, have raised the possibility of a back-channel diplomatic opening during or around this period. However, the same analysts note that any talks would likely be tactical, designed to manage pressure while North Korea continues developing its weapons program, rather than genuinely denuclearizing. Here's my honest read. Kim Jong Un has watched what happens when countries enter negotiations with America and those negotiations fail. He has watched it twice now with Iran, and before that with the broader non-proliferation process. If he engages, he will do so on extremely careful terms, with every safeguard possible, and with absolutely no intention of giving up his nuclear arsenal. That's not pessimism. That's pattern recognition. The question isn't whether Kim will talk. The question is whether America is willing to engage a nuclear North Korea as a permanent nuclear state, because that's the only basis on which Pyongyang will come to the table. North Korea has been supplying Russia with military materials, confirmed by multiple Western intelligence assessments, including artillery shells and, according to U.S. and South Korean officials, approximately 12,000 military personnel deployed in support of Russian operations. In exchange, North Korea has reportedly received military technology transfers. With Iran now consumed by its own conflict, its supply relationship with Russia is disrupted. This strengthens North Korea's position as Russia's primary unconventional military partner. We need to be honest about something that makes many people uncomfortable. In the cold logic of geopolitics, not in the moral logic, but in the strategic logic, North Korea is currently in a stronger position than it was 2 weeks ago. Its deterrent looks more justified. Its value to Russia has increased. Its reading of the situation has been vindicated. I say this not to celebrate it, I don't, but because understanding it accurately is the only way to respond to it effectively. If we underestimate how strong Kim's hand feels right now, we will misjudge every diplomatic move that follows. Multiple international security analysts and institutions, including experts at the Stimson Center and the Council on Foreign Relations, have raised concerns that the Iran strikes may accelerate nuclear proliferation globally. The reasoning: if states observe that a non-nuclear country facing superpower pressure was struck despite decades of resistance, and if they observe that a nuclear-armed state in a similar geopolitical position faces a different calculus, the incentive to pursue nuclear weapons increases. This is an analytical concern, not a confirmed outcome. I want to end the analysis section by stepping back from the strategic framing for just a moment. We talk about proliferation as a policy problem, and it is. But it's also a human problem. Every nuclear weapon that gets built is a threat to human lives, yours, mine, our children's. The reason the non-proliferation system was built was precisely because humans understood that enough of these weapons existing in enough unstable situations eventually means one of them gets used. I'm not saying that's inevitable. I'm saying it's a risk that just got meaningfully higher this week. And I think we owe it to ourselves to say that out loud. Here is where things stand on March 4th, 2026. The conflict is on day 6. Iran is fighting for survival. Russia is recalibrating. China is watching. And North Korea is, as it always does, absorbing every lesson quietly and deciding its next move. Based on current analysis, 3 scenarios appear most likely for the Korean Peninsula in the coming weeks. Scenario 1, Kim makes a careful, conditional diplomatic outreach, using Trump's China visit as an opening, not to give anything up, but to manage the temperature and buy time. Most analysts currently view this as the near-term most likely scenario. Scenario 2, Kim concludes that any engagement carries too much risk and doubles down on building out North Korea's nuclear and conventional capabilities, while deepening ties with Russia and China. Scenario 3, Kim conducts a missile or nuclear test, a deliberate signal that North Korea is not Iran, that its deterrent is real, and that striking it carries consequences of a fundamentally different kind. I want to close with something that I think gets lost in these big geopolitical discussions. In Iran right now, there are ordinary people, teachers, doctors, students, parents, living through something none of them chose and none of them can stop. In North Korea, there are 26 million people whose futures are being decided in a room they've never been invited into. Geopolitics is about power and strategy and deterrence, but it is built on top of human lives. And I think the most important thing any of us can do, whether you're an analyst, a policymaker, or just someone watching this channel at home, is to remember that. The numbers are people. The decisions have faces. This is a story that is not over. We will keep following it, and we will keep being honest with you about what we know, what we don't know, and what we think. That is Capital Talk for this evening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying informed. Good night, and take care of each other.